Most people believe that if they are kind, patient, and respectful, others will naturally treat them the same way. But reality doesn't work like that. Some of the nicest people in the world are also the most disrespected. Not because they're weak, not because they're unlucky, but because they never learned one simple Stoic truth. People don't respect the boundaries you think you have. They respect the boundaries you consistently enforce. Every time you tolerate disrespect, every time you say yes when you want to say no, every time you sacrifice your peace just to avoid disappointing someone, you are silently teaching people exactly how they are allowed to treat you. And once that lesson is learned, changing it becomes incredibly difficult. Marcus Aurelius understood something that most people never realize. You cannot control how others behave, but you are completely responsible for what you continue to allow. Your boundaries are not walls built to punish other people. They are standards that protect your character. Without them, your kindness becomes weakness. Your generosity becomes expectation. Your patience becomes permission. And slowly, people stop appreciating your presence because they begin expecting your sacrifice. In this video, you'll discover the Stoic reason nobody respects your boundaries. More importantly, you'll learn how to rebuild your self-respect without becoming cold, without becoming angry, and without becoming someone you're not. Because true Stoicism was never about controlling other people. It was always about refusing to surrender yourself. Let's begin. You teach people how to treat you. One of the biggest lies people believe is that respect is something you earn simply by being a good person. It sounds comforting. It sounds fair. But it isn't true. There are people with the biggest hearts who are constantly ignored. People who are always available for everyone else. Yet somehow, nobody seems available for them. Why? Because being kind and having boundaries are not the same thing. Every relationship begins with observation. Before people know your personality, before they understand your values, they watch your behavior. They notice what you tolerate. They notice what you ignore. They notice what you forgive. And most importantly, they notice whether your words actually mean anything. Imagine someone constantly arrives an hour late whenever they meet you. The first time, you say nothing. The second time, you laugh it off. The third time, you tell yourself they're probably just busy. Months later, they're still late. Not because they hate you, not because they want to disrespect you, but because you've unknowingly taught them that being late has no consequences. This is how boundaries disappear. Not through one dramatic moment, but through hundreds of tiny moments where you silently tell people, "It's okay." Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that he could not control the actions of others, but he could always control his own response. That distinction changes everything. Stoicism never asks you to force people to respect you. Instead, it asks you to stop rewarding behavior that destroys your peace. Think about your own life. Have you ever answered phone calls you didn't want to answer, simply because you felt guilty? Have you ever agreed to plans you didn't want, just because saying no felt uncomfortable? Have you ever apologized, not because you were wrong, but because you wanted to keep everyone happy? Every one of those moments sends a message. The message is not spoken out loud, but people hear it anyway. It says, "My comfort matters less than yours." And once people receive that message enough times, they begin treating it as the truth. The painful part is that most people don't even realize they're doing it. They believe they're being loving, helpful, patient, understanding. But patience without standards eventually becomes permission. Generosity without limits becomes expectation. And kindness without boundaries slowly becomes self-abandonment. The Stoics understood that your life belongs to you. Your time is limited. Your energy is limited. Your attention is limited. Giving those things away carelessly is not virtue. It is neglect. Real kindness includes kindness toward yourself. Because if you cannot protect your own peace, you will eventually have nothing left to give anyone else. The first step toward earning genuine respect is understanding that every action teaches people how to treat you. The question is, what have your actions been teaching them? The hidden cost of wanting everyone to like you. There is a silent addiction that controls millions of people. It doesn't look dangerous. In fact, society often praises it. The addiction is wanting everyone to like you. At first, it seems harmless. You avoid conflict. You smile when you're uncomfortable. You agree when you really disagree. You tell yourself you're simply being polite. But slowly, without realizing it, you begin living for other people's approval instead of your own principles. The Stoics warned against this long before social media ever existed. Epictetus taught that if you try to please everyone, you eventually stop being yourself. Think about that for a moment. If every decision you make depends on how other people will react, who is really in control of your life? You or them? Imagine a tree that bends every time the wind changes direction. At first, it seems flexible, but eventually, it loses its strength. People are no different. If your opinions change depending on who you're speaking to, if your values disappear whenever someone disagrees with you, people stop seeing conviction. They see uncertainty, and uncertainty rarely earns respect. Many people believe they lose relationships because they set boundaries. The truth is often the opposite. Healthy relationships survive healthy boundaries. Only unhealthy relationships are threatened by them. When someone becomes angry simply because you said no, they are revealing something important. They never respected your boundary. They only enjoyed your obedience. That realization can be painful, especially when it involves people you love. But pain often reveals the truth that comfort tries to hide. Marcus Aurelius never lived to impress the crowd. He lived according to virtue. Some people admired him. Others criticized him. Neither changed his character. That is emotional freedom. Ask yourself, how many decisions have you made this year simply because you were afraid someone would be disappointed? How many opportunities have you missed because you didn't want to upset anyone? How much peace have you sacrificed, trying to protect an image that only exists inside other people's minds? The desire to be liked creates invisible chains. You begin editing your words, hiding your opinions, ignoring your instincts, and over time, you become a stranger to yourself. Stoicism teaches something far more powerful. Your responsibility is not to be liked. Your responsibility is to live with integrity. Ironically, the moment you stop chasing approval, people often begin respecting you more, not because you've become harder, but because you've become genuine. Real confidence is quiet. It doesn't beg for acceptance. It doesn't apologize for existing. It simply stands on principles, whether people applaud or walk away, because a life built on approval will always belong to the crowd. But a life built on principles will always belong to you. Why kindness without boundaries becomes weakness. There is nothing weak about kindness. In fact, true kindness requires enormous strength. The problem begins when kindness is no longer a choice. When it becomes an obligation, when you feel guilty every time you say no, when you constantly place yourself last, When you believe sacrificing your peace is the price of being a good person, that is no longer kindness. That is fear disguised as virtue. The Stoics admired compassion, but they never encouraged self-destruction because they understood a simple truth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Imagine a candle. Its purpose is to give light. But if everyone keeps taking pieces of the candle without allowing it to be restored, eventually, there is no light left to give. Many people live exactly like that candle. Every day, someone asks for another favor, another hour, another sacrifice, another compromise, and because they don't want to disappoint anyone, they keep saying yes, until one day, they wake up emotionally exhausted, not because they were too kind, but because they never protected the source of their kindness. People often confuse availability with love. They think that always being there proves loyalty. But endless availability does something unexpected. It teaches people to take your presence for granted. Think about the people who respect doctors, teachers, mentors, leaders. Do they respect them because they are available every second? No. They respect them because their time has value. Scarcity creates appreciation. Constant availability often creates expectation. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean ignoring people. It means understanding that your time, your attention, and your peace are valuable, and valuable things must be protected. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. How many times have you imagined someone becoming angry if you said no, only to discover later that nothing terrible happened? Most of the fear lives inside our own minds. We create disasters that never arrive, so we keep saying yes, to avoid battles that only exist in our imagination. The tragedy is that every unnecessary yes becomes a quiet no to your own goals, your own family, your own peace, your own future. The strongest people are not those who never help others. The strongest people know exactly when to help and exactly when to step back, because they understand something most people never learn. Boundaries don't reduce love. They protect it. When people know your kindness has limits, they begin appreciating it. When your generosity is intentional, it becomes meaningful. When your time is respected, your presence becomes valuable. Kindness without boundaries slowly teaches people that they can always take more, but kindness guided by wisdom teaches people to value what they receive. And that is the kind of kindness the Stoics admired. Not the kindness that destroys the person giving it, but the kindness that remains strong enough to continue giving for a lifetime. Marcus Aurelius never argued for respect. One of the greatest misunderstandings about strength is believing that strong people constantly prove themselves. They don't. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the most powerful empires in history. He commanded armies. He governed millions of people. Yet when you read his private journal, you won't find a man obsessed with making people respect him. You find a man obsessed with mastering himself. That difference changes everything. Most people spend their lives trying to control how they are seen. The Stoics spent their lives controlling who they became. Imagine two men walking into the same room. The first immediately tries to impress everyone. He talks louder, laughs louder, explains his achievements. He desperately wants people to notice him. The second man says very little. He listens carefully. He speaks only when necessary. He doesn't chase attention. Yet somehow, the room begins paying attention to him anyway. Why? Because confidence never announces itself. it reveals itself. Marcus Aurelius understood that respect is not something you demand. It is something that naturally follows character. Think about the people you admire most. Do you admire them because they constantly reminded everyone how important they were? Or because their actions quietly proved it? Real authority is silent. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need applause. And it certainly doesn't waste energy arguing with people determined to misunderstand it. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing every act of disrespect deserves a response. Someone insults you, you immediately defend yourself. Someone questions your worth, you begin explaining yourself. Someone crosses a line, you argue for hours hoping they'll finally understand. But what if they already understand and simply don't care? The Stoics recognize something painful. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Some people are committed to misunderstanding you. Others benefit from your lack of boundaries. Trying to convince them otherwise is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Your energy disappears. Nothing changes. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning that he would meet difficult people, selfish people, ungrateful people, arrogant people. Yet he never instructed himself to fight every battle. He instructed himself to protect his own character. That is where real power lives. Sometimes, the strongest response is not another argument. It is quiet action. It is calmly walking away. It is refusing to negotiate your principles. It is allowing your life, rather than your words, to become your answer. People often believe silence is weakness, but silence chosen from strength can be more powerful than the loudest speech. When your standards remain firm, when your actions remain consistent, when your peace is no longer controlled by someone else's opinion, you stop chasing respect. And strangely, that is often the moment genuine respect begins to appear. Not because you demanded it, not because you forced it, but because your character became impossible to ignore. Marcus Aurelius never wasted his life convincing everyone of his worth. He spent his life becoming worthy. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson he leaves behind. Become the kind of person whose actions speak so clearly that your words no longer need to defend you. Why people test you repeatedly. Very few people wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to completely disrespect this person today. It rarely happens like that. Instead, disrespect usually begins with something much smaller. A tiny test, a small request, a harmless joke, a favor that makes you uncomfortable, a promise that gets broken, a line that gets crossed just a little. Most people don't notice these moments. The Stoics did, because they understood something about human nature. People naturally explore limits. Children do it. Employees do it. Friends do it. Even family members do it. Not always because they are cruel, but because they are trying to understand where your standards actually begin. Imagine someone borrowing money from you. They promise to pay you back next week. Next week arrives. Nothing happens. You say, it's okay. A month passes. Still nothing. Again you say, it's okay. Months later, they ask to borrow money again. At that moment, many people become angry. They think, how dare they ask again? But the better question is this: why wouldn't they? Every previous experience taught them there were no consequences. This is how boundaries slowly disappear. Not through one massive act of disrespect, but through repeated moments of tolerated behavior. Every small compromise becomes evidence. Evidence that your standards are flexible. Evidence that your words can be ignored. Evidence that eventually, you will give in. The problem is not that people test boundaries. The problem is that many people fail the test before they even realize one is happening. Think about your own life. How many times have you laughed at something that actually hurt you? Simply because you didn't want to seem sensitive. How many times have you accepted being interrupted, ignored, or taken for granted because speaking up felt uncomfortable? Each of those moments teaches people something. Not about your feelings, about your limits. And once people believe your limits don't really exist, they stop treating them as if they matter. The Stoics believed that discipline is built through consistency. The same is true for boundaries. One clear response today prevents 10 uncomfortable situations tomorrow. Many people wait until they are exhausted, until resentment has filled their hearts, until one final incident pushes them over the edge. Then suddenly, they explode. Everyone around them becomes confused. They say, "You've never had a problem with this before." And they're right, because silence was mistaken for acceptance. This is why healthy boundaries are calm, not emotional, not aggressive, not filled with anger, simply consistent. The moment people realize that your standards remain the same, whether they like them or not, the testing begins to disappear. Not because people become perfect, but because they finally understand this person means what they say. And that quiet consistency will always command more respect than emotional reactions ever could. The Stoic art of saying no without anger. Many people believe there are only two choices. Either you stay quiet and allow people to cross your boundaries, or you become aggressive and push everyone away. The Stoics rejected both extremes. There is a third option: calm firmness, the ability to say no without guilt, without anger, without feeling the need to explain yourself for 20 minutes. Most people struggle with this because they confuse boundaries with rejection. But saying no to a request is not the same as rejecting a person. You can respect someone and still refuse what they ask of you. You can love your family and still protect your peace. You can care deeply about your friends and still decide that certain behavior is no longer acceptable. That is not selfishness. That is wisdom. Imagine someone asks for your help. You genuinely don't have the time. But instead of saying, "I'm sorry, I can't," you invent excuses. You blame work. You blame your schedule. You blame traffic. Why? Because deep down, you're afraid that a simple no won't be accepted. The Stoics would ask a different question. Why are you trying so hard to make your boundary comfortable for someone else, while making yourself uncomfortable instead? A healthy boundary does not require a dramatic speech. It requires consistency. Sometimes the strongest sentence you will ever say is also the shortest. No, not because you are angry, not because you hate anyone, but because your answer is honest. Many people fear that setting boundaries will make them lose relationships. Sometimes it will, but if someone only remains in your life, as long as you abandon your own peace, was that relationship ever healthy to begin with? That question is difficult, because the truth often is. Epictetus taught that no person can truly harm your character without your permission. Think about that. People can insult you, disagree with you, walk away from you, but only you decide whether you betray your own principles. That is where freedom begins. Real confidence is not raising your voice. Real confidence is remaining calm, even when someone dislikes your answer, because you understand something they do not. Approval is temporary, Self-respect lasts a lifetime. There will always be people who become uncomfortable the moment you stop saying yes to everything. Do not mistake their disappointment for evidence that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is evidence that you are finally doing something right. The Stoic does not build boundaries out of fear. He builds them out of clarity. He knows who he is. He knows what he values. And because of that, he no longer negotiates the very things that protect his peace. The goal is not to become harder. The goal is to become clearer. Because clear people waste less time explaining, less time apologizing, less time seeking permission to live according to their values. And in that quiet clarity, they discover something extraordinary. The people who truly respect you will never ask you to abandon yourself just to keep them comfortable. Respect begins the moment you stop negotiating your principles. There comes a moment in every person's life when they become tired, not physically, but emotionally. Tired of explaining themselves, tired of being taken for granted, tired of giving more than they receive, tired of pretending everything is fine, when deep inside, they know it isn't. For many people, that moment becomes the beginning of change. Not because the world suddenly becomes kinder, but because they finally become honest with themselves. The Stoics believed that every human being possesses something more valuable than wealth, more valuable than status, and more valuable than the approval of the crowd: character. Once your character becomes your highest priority, everything else begins to fall into place. You stop asking, "Will people be upset if I say no?" Instead, you ask, "Can I still respect myself if I say yes?" That single question changes everything, because life is filled with choices that appear small, but slowly shape who you become. Every unnecessary apology, every broken promise you accept, every insult you pretend didn't hurt, every moment you betray your own values just to keep the peace. These moments do not disappear. They accumulate, until one day, you no longer recognize the person staring back at you in the mirror. Marcus Aurelius understood something extraordinary. Your greatest responsibility is not making everyone else comfortable. It is refusing to abandon your own virtue. That doesn't mean becoming selfish. It doesn't mean becoming cold. It means understanding that peace without self-respect is not peace at all. Many people spend years searching for confidence. Reading books, watching videos, waiting for the perfect moment to feel stronger. But confidence rarely arrives first. Action does. The first boundary will feel uncomfortable. The first honest conversation will feel difficult. The first time you calmly walk away from disrespect, your heart may race, your hands may shake, you may even question yourself afterward. That is normal. Courage has never been the absence of fear. It has always been the decision to act despite it. Every time you protect your principles, you strengthen something invisible: your self-respect. And unlike praise from other people, self-respect cannot be taken away. People will still misunderstand you. Some will call you distant. Others will call you difficult. A few may even leave your life. Let them. The people who only valued your silence were never protecting your peace. They were protecting their convenience. The people who truly belong in your life will adjust. They will respect your honesty. They will appreciate your consistency. And most importantly, they will never require you to become less of yourself just to remain close to them. This is the quiet strength of Stoicism. Not controlling other people, not winning every argument, not proving your worth, but living so faithfully to your principles that your life itself becomes your message. Because in the end, respect is never demanded. It is reflected. It reflects the standards you refuse to compromise. It reflects the peace you refuse to surrender. And it reflects the person you choose to become every single day. So the next time someone asks why your boundaries have changed, smile calmly and remember this: they haven't changed. For the first time, you simply decided to honor them. Not everyone will understand your boundaries. Not everyone will agree with them. And not everyone will stay in your life because of them. And that is okay, because the purpose of boundaries was never to control other people. It was always to protect your peace. If this message made you reflect, then take a moment to be honest with yourself. Where in your life have you been saying yes when you meant no? Where have you been staying silent when you should have spoken? And where have you been abandoning your own peace just to keep others comfortable? The Stoics believed that wisdom begins with awareness, and awareness begins with honesty. Not the kind of honesty you show others, but the kind you show yourself. Because the moment you start recognizing your patterns, you gain the power to change them. You do not need to become a different person overnight. You only need to begin noticing when you are betraying your own standards. One moment at a time, one decision at a time, one boundary at a time. If you take nothing else from this video, remember this: respect is not something you chase. It is something that naturally follows a life lived with clarity and consistency. And the moment you stop negotiating your principles, you will notice something quietly change. Not the world around you, but the way the world responds to you. If you found value in this video, consider subscribing. Not because of the channel, but because of the journey we are building together. And if this message reached you at the right time, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay disciplined, stay grounded, and protect your peace.